I want to steal that chick's hair.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Just want to take it from her head and just stick it straight on mine.
Scalper.
In the night, she'll never know. She'll never realize.
Wake up, bald. Hello, welcome to the Drunk Duck Quackcast. This is Ozone Ocean, and with me on this Quackcast, which is Quackcast number 375, I've got Tan Serene. Hi, Tans.
Hello.
Pitface. Hi, Pit.
Hello.
M. Claire. Hi, M.
Hello.
And Baines. Hello, Baines.
Hello.
You're the only one with, except for me, with one word name. I never realised that. Everyone else has their DD names with two. It's Tanserine.
Oh, is there a hyphen?
Oh, yeah. Emma Claire. Well, there we are.
See if we can find our hyphens.
Oh, God. I lost mine a long time ago. Okay.
We will have to worry only if someone comes up long that has three names. So it's fine.
We'll borrow one of theirs. So, in this Quackcast number 375, we're going to be talking about categories or, categories, like subgenres, genres, that kind of thing. When you, it's a way of selling your work under the umbrella title of a genre and explaining it to people. And also when you're an audience or when you're a viewer, consumer of work, it's a way of looking for stuff that you're into. It helps you. But before we get into that, I have to mention the featured comic, and it was Tethered from Dusk Till Dawn.
Yeah. Nice art there.
Yeah,
cool.
very, very pretty little manga. So I hope people enjoyed that one. So Tethered. So here I go with the feature. Hello, I'm Ozone Ocean, and my feature for the week was Tethered. From Dusk to Dawn, beautiful Norina, the elf, and Melodwin, the stag sister, are thrown together by a surprising twist of fate after the magical heartwood tree in the forest exploded mysteriously during a ritual and killed all Melodwin's sisters. Norina and Melodwin are strangely tethered via markings on their wrists, markings that seem to break the very laws of magic in their world. They must undertake a dangerous journey together through lands infested with murderous bandits to a distant academy so they can find out what it all means. This is a fantasy adventure comic drawn in the manga style. The art appears to be digital, and some pages are fully coloured, while others are in tones of purple and white, although you can see some earlier versions of the pages in pencil. I think maybe that's just one. So yeah, it seemed to be a pencil drawn, then shaded and coloured in digital, or inked in digital, I should say, and some of them are coloured, and very, very pretty colours they are too, very expertly coloured. Very beautiful. You should have a look. It's quite a bright and colourful comic in the coloured pages, and most of them are those tones of bluey purple sort of thing, and mostly line art, but still quite pretty, very well finished artwork. You should enjoy the action here, the pretty ladies and their budding relationship. Yes, you see the characters getting more and more friendly with each other. They obviously thrown together with this kind of arbitrary twist of fate, and then having this developing friendship. So read Tethered from Dusk to Dawn by Tethered Manga, rated M. And that was the feature, Tethered from Dusk till Dawn. That sort of reminds me of the title anyway of Lady Hawk, because it was very much about Dusk till Dawn. So let's see, what we're doing now is the featured music. Gun Wallace has given us the music to The Adventures of Tildy and Chewie. So we're greeted by the imposing strains of an Imperial March on heavy bass guitar before we're rocketed off into the pink heavenly dream cloud filled with rainbows and Teletubbies. So take it away, Gumwallace, with the adventures of Tildy and Chewie. That was our music. Thank you very much for that, Gumwallace. The Adventures of Tildy and Chewie. This is a comic by Patrick Kind, rated E. So you might want to read that. So anyway, categories, guys. Categories. Okay, I'll explain a bit about this to the listeners before we get into it. Okay, so I came to this idea because I was looking at my Facebook feed, and there was a whole bunch of little images where people had posted stuff about, the genres of cyberpunk, and something explaining that, steampunk, and dieselpunk. And these are established genres. We all know about them. At least most of us do. People know less about dieselpunk. Sorry, what's that, Pete?
Subgenres, you mean?
Yeah, so established genres.
Maybe we'll talk about that.
Yeah. They're established subgenres. We know mostly about all these different things, and they're useful for selling unusual genres of work. So you wouldn't really package steampunk and dieselpunk as easily under sci-fi. So you have to sort of do another little kind of annex to the normal sci-fi umbrella in order to encompass these and to sell them to people. And if you're a viewer, a consumer of this stuff, you have to have these genre names in order to look up what you're into. But these guys had added a couple more. So they added the idea of ray punk, as in ray guns, and atom punk, as in atomic technology. And their idea was, steampunk encompassed like a weird kind of sci-fi from in the 19th century. Then dieselpunk encompassed a kind of a sci-fi just after that. Then, cyberpunk is sort of like 1980s onwards. And their idea of ray punk and atom punk was sort of to package it in between, like the 1950s and the 1960s, and then the 70s and whatever. So, but my contention of reading that was it's complete nonsense, because we don't need to package those genres in. We don't need to package those under a subgenre, because that is already sci-fi. Into the 1960s, 1950s, that's already an established sci-fi, part of the sci-fi world. You don't need to actually package that. It's just it's taking things too granular. So as a reader, you're not going to be looking for that kind of thing. It's just too specific. Or if you do sort of see that, you'll think, well, you're just making a nonsense out of genres. So you're confusing me with the choice sort of thing. So that's what happens when you have those kind of packaging stuff too hard, when you're working too hard to make all these different choices. But anyway, I wanted to sort of open that up as a discussion and ask and talk about it with you guys. So yeah, now I've sort of brought that to a head. Do you guys think there can be too many genres or subgenres, or do you think it's helpful to readers to keep on like being granular and saying, yeah, so this is a specific kind of sci-fi where we have only furry people who like have 3 penises and they live in the year 3000, so this is furry 3 penis punk?
Well, I think first of all, there's a difference, and you've mentioned this already a little bit, but like I want to highlight more that there is a difference between talking about these genres in terms of marketing and in terms as something you take as your own kind of niche or your own kind of identity. So before we get into that, I at least am not going to be talking about it in terms of, should you or shouldn't you invest in, say, like, I don't know, like pastel goth or something like that, for yourself. That's not what I'm talking about. But when it comes to marketing, I think there are 2 main ways to look at this. Either you're marketing to a very niche audience, which you might want to do. Your goal might not be mass consumption. Maybe you're part of some kind of online community of people who are also part of the same subgenre that you're part of, and maybe you want to make something specifically for them. That's fine. But like what Oz is saying, if you want to deliver something to a more broader audience, it's not so much, ignore those qualities of the subgenre, but don't make them your main focus, your main point. You know what I mean? Like,
well, when it comes to webcomics and when you're updating, so when you're creating a webcomic, particularly if you're hosting it on a site, and this is any site now, you are asked to specify what essentially what your genre is. And your genre outlines, so like that would be, before I get into that would be like your romance, your dramas, your comedies, sci-fi, action. You've kind of got your like umbrella genres. And then that's when your subgenres come in. So like your genre establishes the ground rules. It says, these are the expectations of my comic. So if it's a comedy, you're going to expect to have some laughs in there. If it's a science fiction one, you're going to have a fantastical story that has focus on science and technology. So it sets up the ground rules and expectations. Now, the subgenres, which can be different niches, as many as you want, I guess, it's up to you as an author. They can then dictate not just the style of the story, but then the subversion of the expectations set up by the ground rules of the genre. So if you've got, like Fallout, which I would actually classify as ray punk and atomic punk. So the Fallout series of video games, which I've actually been playing the last few days. Kind of applicable, yeah.
Sorry, I'll just get it into. I would classify that as under the established genre of post-apocalyptic.
Yeah, well, but even then, post-apocalyptic is, I would almost argue, another subgenre. It is science fiction.
But that's an established
they're all
already.
Yeah. So the ground rules are science fiction, right? So that's your main genre. And then underneath that would be then your subgenres, which would be post-apocalyptic, atomic punk, and ray punk. And what they do is that they dictate the sort of things that you think you're going to see or can expect to see. And then from there, you can be like, okay, within that, what rules can I break? So it's the point of a genre is to set up your audience with rules and expectations. And then as an author, you know what those rules are, and then you can choose which ones to subvert or which ones to highlight. It's then up to you from there.
I would also like to add that we shouldn't just think of genres as, like you said earlier, like babushka dolls, the Russian dolls. but they are also like overlapping circles where your particular work might fall within two of them or three of them. Like you talked about post-apocalyptic, but that could also be under dystopia, which isn't necessarily science fiction. The dystopian work could easily fall across a whole number of genres. Doesn't necessarily need for it to be set in the future or have space people or planets or whatever. So what do you do with that? What I think that the idea for having a really large array of different genres, subgenres, and tiny, small niche genres maybe, is the ability to not only prime your audience, as you said, but also to better describe where you will fall within the narrative from many angles. Because I think that it is very hard to just say this is the category of my work and that's the only category. It will naturally, if it's not like Aesop's fable or something, it will fall within a whole range of different categories. So perhaps maybe for in theory, ray punk or whatever punk is not as necessary because they can be easily classified under bigger punk categories. But maybe when you need to describe like a dystopian ray punk future, but that is not necessarily science fiction per se, maybe that's more accurate. Maybe that is a more accurate representation of your work that you will put in the blurb of your book. I think that we should be a little flexible with this because it's all about communicating your work.
And like on top of that too is kind of like it could be a dystopian future or an atomic punk story, but your actual story is it could be some kind of relationship story or rite of passage drama, or it's a horror. It's like what you're doing with your sort of conflict of your story can be so many different things in that kind of setting,
Of course, you have multiple kind of categorizations like that, but what I feel, my whole contention with this ray punk, atom punk kind of thing, you're actually diluting the whole punk terminology there. Because that had very specific kind of reasons for why it came about. There's no reason to sort of further add to it. You really did have to have steampunk as a specific subgenre. Started out with cyberpunk, which was just a way of selling work that came about. You had Williams. What's his name? The famous guy who started the whole genre in the 1980s. Robin Williams. Yeah, John Williamson. That was it. No, so he started. So that's like made of. It's inspired by Blade Runner, the film by Ridley Scott. Film version, of course, of the novel. Whoever did the novel, I can't remember. Anyway, but so the genre was inspired by Blade Runner, and the idea was it depicted kind of instead of traditional sci-fi, which is always kind of spaceships or that kind of stuff, it's like highfalutin people who are really in the know, wealthy people or soldiers or that kind of thing. This was now sci-fi from the point of view of the streets and young people, basically punks. So you had it focused on the sort of the grittiness. So that's why you needed the whole cyberpunk as a way to sell it, because it was a very, very specific kind of version of sci-fi that came out. So you had these street punks, street technology, people who had body modification, that became a big thing. That wasn't initially a big thing, but that body modification, that became. And then we had steampunk that came along a bit later. So steampunk has nothing to do with cyberpunk, but they market it as that because you have high technology based on steam, and you also have body modification, and you also have people who like the same kind of punk aesthetic. So they need steampunk. Copying the cyberpunk thing was an easy way to sell that because it was so unusual. Yeah.
So if you've got an entire subculture writing genre, which is essentially like steampunk, but uses either ray guns or
I'll get to that.
Atomic energy is like.
I'll get to that. I'll get to that. So what I'm trying to say is, so steampunk had no way of selling itself because that was just totally new, and that took its inspiration from H.G. Wells' Jules Verne, which aren't steampunk, but that's like proto steampunk. You could sort of say that was. So you've got that. So it's based on steam as the high technology, and then you have the diesel punk. So that is like after. A long time after steampunk came along, so you have internal combustion energy. That becomes the basis for your high technology. So again, it's a new thing. It's hard to sell because it doesn't exist already. So you have to sort of market it in a way that you can sell it to people that they can easily understand, or that makes it sound like something they would want to have a look at. So again, that's a new thing. We could look at like Mad Max, even though that's definitely not originally diesel punk, and that's already post-apocalyptic. But Mad Max can sort of be taken as a template for the aesthetic for diesel punk. And a lot of different things can be sort of encompassed under diesel punk, but mainly it's like stuff after 1900, 1920, 1930, and you've got diesel powered mechs and things like that. So you needed those kind of categories, but after those, then we go into the present time. So sci-fi really started from after 1930s. So sci-fi really started as an actual genre with people writing for it. Into the 1930s, into the 1940s, when they had established technology. So we had, electrical technology, or we had atomic power, all that kind of stuff. So that's where conventional sci-fi started. And atomic punk and ray punk come along. They just fully are part of sci-fi already, established sci-fi. That is like the white man. Basically how you have people saying, "Oh, white is good too. It's good to be white." I'm this, that's what that kind of sci-fi is, because it's like, it's already got its category. It's already got its special day. It doesn't need to have its special day, It's like saying, this is, there's Black History Month. Why do we have White History Month? That's basically how I look at like ray punk and atomic punk, because that is fully established. Like we go back to the 1940s, 1950s. All sci-fi is that. All sci-fi until the 1980s. Well, even after that was already that. Sci-fi into the bloody 2000s was still all the same kind of atomic power and ray guns, and it's probably still people today. So it's giving it a category where, just because those other things are category, they're saying, oh, we need a category now to sell our things. So that's where I'm sort of coming from, where you're giving things categories where they don't need it. They don't need a way to sell that. So yeah, that was why I sort of came into this, thinking that it's just, you're being unnecessary. You're being too specific. And you don't need that as a way to sell. It's not like saying, oh, this is like a romance, and we have boy-girl kind of stuff, subcategories. It's making up a category in order to make yourself special, make yourself feel special, when you don't need that category to sell it. You don't need that category for an audience. Like, you say if I were to describe Pinky TA to people, I had to say it as diesel punk as a way of making it like, oh, that's the way I can sell it, or that's the way people can understand it. But if you made a sci-fi, like a traditional sci-fi, you don't need to say ray punk or diesel punk. Well, people won't know what that means for a start. And you just say sci-fi and it already sells it. So, there.
Well, as I was saying earlier, having played Fallout, I would actually argue that there is a place for atomic punk. Because it's almost going in, like, it describes a very specific, almost divergent path in human history. So it gets up to the 1950s and then things split. So the world goes in two different ways. It goes through technology that is focused on nuclear power, and then there's our version which has technology that's not focused on nuclear power. So it sets up different expectations. And it doesn't matter whether or not you, like, I can understand being frustrated at the level of what you would feel unnecessary genres, but it seems to actually be quite established. And it, as I said, if it sets up particular styles and expectations, which are obviously in popular culture already, Fallout has gone a long way to help market both ray and atomic punk subgenres, then I argue they're fine. If it helps people feel connected to a work, I honestly don't see what the problem is.
If it does. I mean, as like, you know, I an avid follower of pop culture, I know it's already quite happy in the whole post-apocalyptic genre. That's already completely understood to be part of that. Like, as a proud member of the post-apocalyptic genre, and that's the way most people have always understood it. I've never heard people feel the need to give it like further kind of things. But I won't like I don't want to like argue like between my contention, you know, I'm right, you know, all right kind of thing. But we can expand this to other things as well.
I'd say we're okay. So I think in general we're seeing a lot of genres expand and get more subgenres, and it keeps on multiplying. And I think the reason, see, you keep on comparing it to, you know, when the so-called original subgenres were first forged compared to now. But see, it's also a much different pool now than it was back when, say, sci-fi started and whatnot, and became real popular in the 80s. We have the internet now, which has become very democratized. So many people have it available as a platform to develop their ideas, and that means more games, more writing subjects, more things get published, and there's more way to publish them, which means that more people can kind of play with these genres and stuff like that. And while I agree that, you know, when it comes to marketing, you might want to be careful how much you put a fine point on your title, like this is such and such genre, you know, when it gets too defined. But on the other hand, the creation of these genres, you know, and the use of them at all, I understand why there are so many now, and it's because there are so many projects that are released, and so many more people now, and things being released that are playing with these subgenres in new ways, or taking old points of them and developing them further, or really hitting on them a bit more, you know, like the dystopian society, you know, as we were talking about before. Yeah, that's nothing new. But now that sci-fi, in a sense, is becoming perhaps even more popular and more mainstream in some ways, maybe these different ways that the genre manifests itself does spur these new categories, and as obnoxious as that can seem sometimes, I think it's just the way things go when more voices are added to it, more things are done with it, because, as human beings, we want to categorize things, and sometimes that's a help and sometimes that's a hindrance, but it's what we do.
And it helps you find targeted audiences which are going to be engaged with your work. And when you're competing in a pool that has so many people in it, you need these more granular subgenres to really target those niche audiences and get them in and get them engaged. So we've got one series which you can't go any further. It is definitely sci-fi fantasy. There is no other subgenres there. But then we've got another one, and it has its main genre is rom-com, but then underneath that there is a whole heap of subgenres because we're targeting a very particular niche. And now that we're doing that, it's interesting to see how that one's growing and how the other one's growing, and they're growing in two different ways based on the audiences and subgenres that we're addressing and exploring. So there's definitely a space for niche subgenres to help you stand out and access an audience, which if you were just to stick to your umbrella sci-fi, fantasy, comedy, action, romance, if you were just to stick to that, would be harder to fight in or harder to access that.
Mm-hmm. And I would like to say that exactly because far more people are creating than probably ever before, in a way, at least that it can become published far more efficiently, easily, and in bulk. Perhaps we should also consider that the development of the categories happens as a function of this bulk that's being unleashed in the market of entertainment. So one could argue that your classic science fiction of the 70s, for example, around when Star Wars came about, now is not generally science fiction, but it is a space opera. Because it goes and deals with, intergalactic wars and giant intergalactic senates and Game of Thrones in space, basically. So then when you have generally just science fiction, by now it might become such a generic term that you don't really know what there is, except maybe that it is in the future and it has advanced technology. But that isn't enough, because it's not just, a space opera. It's not just space battles. It can be such a wide array of things that you do need the subgenres to clarify where more or less the work is going to fall. And also, as more and more things, because our society also develops, and what was super science fiction 30, 40, 70 years ago now is almost, everyday living. I remember, I am struggling to remember where I saw it, but there was this science fiction series where they had little screens instead of telephones, and they would speak into the screen and talk.
Was that Star
and basically
Trek?
Have it. I don't remember.
Dick Tracy?
I think I don't remember, guys. Really, I don't. But it is exactly like a smartphone, except the only difference is like it had dials and stuff because it reflected our landlines at the time. So now a lot of things that would be science fiction a few decades ago now aren't as much science fiction as they used to be. So even the way that we approach the issue of science fiction changes. And maybe that's why more categories are being produced that might appear redundant if you're not into the entire culture of science fiction creation in that particular niche. Which might happen, for a lot of things. If you're not in the crowd that deals in that sort of thing, it sounds convoluted, redundant, and frustrating. So there's that as well.
Good point.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like the kind of thing it could either grab, this is what you guys have already said, but can kind of grab certain people who are looking for exactly that will now be able to find it if they're looking for that super specific sub-genre. But potentially, like, prevent new readers who might really like what you're doing and like the sort of the central conflicts of what you're doing and your characters and your art and your this and that, but who the genre would just like confuse them and they wouldn't know what it is.
And it's interesting now having two series which are completely different. Our first one being a space opera. But very heavily sci-fi, and that in itself is a niche, which is it's always very big, so it's hard to start out in. You kind of need to get going before anyone really pays attention. And then going into one which was very, so our other one is, I don't know if you've heard of this subgenre, but it is a thing in romance. Animal shapeshifters. So it's guys that shapeshift.
It's a romance genre?
Oh. Yeah, it is. Oh. It's very heavily into, I've read some really awful self-published, literature on the subject. It's an absolute goldmine. It's fantastic.
So it comes from werewolves? Would originally be the thing, I suppose?
It's not really werewolf. Well, it might have come from werewolves, but it's kind of like werewolves and then like the next level. And it's like guys turning into really cute guys, mind you, turning into animals, but usually hot animals like bears and wolves and stuff. And so like having
as opposed to one of the non-hot animals like starfish and
well, actually, this is the funny bit. We decided, we cracked the shits and thought, okay, like we're gonna do something really stupid. So we decided to do a shape-shifting romance to kind of, and we knew the tropes within that. So we knew the expectations set up by that subgenre. And instead, because we know the expectations, we're not just playing to it, but we're also subverting it at the same time. And that falls into the comedy bit because we're poking fun at the subgenre itself. Mm. So all these hot guys turn into like, there's a couple of them which is fairly standard, but then some of them actually turn in, like one of them's a shark. So he actually shapeshifts into a shark. And like our bear character, we want to have him fall in love with a salmon. Like we're like doing all these things that are completely subverting the genre. But the funniest thing about this whole situation is that the shark is actually one of the most popular characters. So like he just steals the show every time he's on screen. He's fantastic. We love him. So because we've hit on a really niche subgenre, which is, you could argue, what's the point of having it? Well, the point of having it is that we have got a lot of ladies' attention and they are loving what we're doing. Yeah. We've got this
and I have to say that I don't think they realize that you're also poking fun at the genre.
I know, it's so frustrating. They're taking it so seriously that are like, yeah, no, a shark, we get it. It's like, oh god, guys, like he's a card shark. His cousin is a loan shark. His other cousin is a pool shark. Can you we're not really being, how much more blatant can we be?
Yeah.
But because we know, like, because we have the ability to tap into what might be a useless subgenre, we're able, it's turned into something we didn't expect. It's really fun to explore a subgenre which might not be getting a lot of attention, and because it's not getting a lot of attention, people latch onto it when it is there.
The thing I would say there is that really does, that's the kind of work that really, really needs a categorization. It really needs a subgenre in order to sell it, because it's so unusual, and who knows about that outside of that? And how do you explain that in any other way? And is that something that appeared, unless you can say it's like werewolves or whatever, that's the only kind of analog I could automatically think. There is nothing. See, that really requires a subgenre in order to explain that to people and to be able to, for people to look for it. Because how else do you find that? It's just nowhere. So that's a kind of case where really, really, it's so helpful.
I could also make a case for needing a subgenre and not actually having it, at least not that I know of. And that has been my problem with That Moonlight, because it is a historical webcomic. Okay, here's a category. It is about World War II. All right. But then it gets extremely muddy, because when you hear World War II, you expect battlefields, you expect war and people making attacks and grenades the whole shebang of war, and the D-Day invasion, or tanks and stuff. And while this may exist in a while in the story, they are not where the story circulates around. It is very much the everyman's and the everyday experience that people that are supposed, because of course they are not, that are supposed to be non-combatants are experiencing during war, at the time during occupation. So how in all hell can I describe it in a single word?
I guess it's slice of life.
Yeah, I actually was tempted. Slice of life. But then they will expect, what will they expect? They will expect a sitcom style.
Contemporary,
Contemporary, yeah. And they are going to get hit with, Nazis picking people off the street and
you call it a war,
and torture and stuff. That is not recreational.
Yeah, but it was a slice of that life at the time.
Yeah,
you should call it a war drama, I thought.
Yeah, but that is not a legit, you actually established subgenre. It's a war drama, because that's the best way I could actually photograph it, quote unquote.
I think it's very well encompassed under the idea of World War II comic occupation. It's about an occupation in World War II, and that's really, you don't need to get more specific than that.
When you hear, okay, now you know my comic, but when you hear war drama, what's the first picture that comes to your mind?
The first one was probably Saving Private Ryan or something like that. That would be
exactly.
Yeah, you're right in terms of the moment you hear war, the first thing you think is people getting blown up in trench warfare. You think about the actual front itself. You don't think about the people who are at home.
Oh.
No, you know what? But maybe this is an indication of where there is the need for maybe or the possibility of more branching off. Because when I hear war drama, I do think of it being more people centered, because that's what drama tells me.
Right. It's not a war movie; it's a war drama.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sort of interpersonal dynamics and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm actually hoping that more people are going to make this connection, but anyone that I have met that has not been you guys immediately tells me like, oh, I expected battles.
When you say drama, though, that
even
seems
though
to like throw a whole new like category into the mix. It's like it's like you're doing an equation, and it's not like 2 times 4. That's the war. It's like 2 times 4 divided by 3. It's a new kind of stand. And if people overlook the fact that you're saying drama, that's weird. I mean, obviously you can't say, oh, you're an idiot because you didn't pay attention to the fact that I said war drama, not war comic. And it's all you who are wrong, not me. It's the only person who gets it. You're all idiots. So unfortunately we can't do that. But, although I'd love it. But, so that is something you have to take on board. If everyone is a misunderstanding, then, if they're not getting the fact that drama is a huge modifier.
After they read, like, a couple of chapters, then, they do sort of, in afterthought, realize, drama. That also happens. So it's just that they are unfamiliar with the particular subcategory, because it is a subcategory that basically I have pulled out of my head. I'm hoping that more people will make war dramas, and then people will make the connection.
I think it's also the fact that people trip over the word war before they get to the word drama. So like you say war, and that sets up those expectations before they've even got to drama. So it's about, I guess, it's just about like continuing to do it and show them what a war drama is, rather than just war and then like a whole heap of like return spaces down drama. It's about keeping those two words together.
If I was to recategorize it and to give it a new subgenre, I would emphasize the idea of occupation, because that seems to be, as you were saying, we read it so we know, but that is a better way of selling it to people, because occupation now
from occupation.
But there have been, that is more in the public consciousness, because Iraq has been occupied by America. They say, oh, there's a war on, but there's not a war on in Iraq. It's an American occupation of Iraq, and people are starting to understand occupied territories in Palestine. So occupation has now become it's filtered more into the public consciousness. When we hear about a lot of like World War II stuff, we know, like, say, the French Resistance was that's like a World War II drama, but it's under occupation. That is the important modifier there, and that does sell it in a way that describes what, another facet of war that's distinct from the battlefront, as Emma was saying. The people getting blown up and stuff like that, actually at the front and the battles. Occupation is a very nuanced kind of specific thing. It's quite different from that. So perhaps that could be a new way of selling it. Because I think people do understand what occupation means, as opposed to battle. That's interesting. Maybe we could sell Pinky Tea as a battle comic. Let's like branch off into a new genre. Battle. I was thinking, like, instead of, how Emma said, like, they trip over the drama part, they focus on the war. Like, you can't switch it around, unfortunately, and say drama war, because then they think it's like a battle between drama students or something like that. So.
I was, or it's like drama war is like, scandals on YouTube and stuff like that. Oh, it's a drama war. Everybody look out!
Oh my god, that would make such a fun comic.
Yeah.
Oh, don't give me ideas.
Oh god. Would people trip over it though if you described it as drama war? They're expecting them to be like wearing helmets and carrot grenades.
No, that would be like cat fights in Bachelor in Paradise. That's a drama war.
Oh god.
Yeah. It's all like the man's affection.
Totally.
I love that show so much.
Oh my god.
I have no shame.
Clearly. Oh jeez. So what do you guys think that, having too many genres, sometimes at least, can make your stuff like unmarketable? Like if you're wanting to be too specific about it, you can really harm yourself in trying to market to people.
I mean, you know what?
You go.
You go. It's so sweet. Okay. I'll get my rambling out of the way. You can close on something smart after I get going to contribute. I think when it comes to marketing, like so many things, you take some risks. And one, first and foremost, it depends on who you're marketing to. Once again, if you're aiming for something that's supposed to have a big mass appeal, then yeah, I suppose you wouldn't put that those words at least at the forefront of your description if we're going to be as blunt as that. The execution of that is a whole other bag of cats. But it's like, I think it's so hard to pinpoint what effect it would have, because there's so many people in the world who will potentially have access to your material now. And those people will be coming from a variety of genre interests themselves. Maybe they're looking for something new, that they've never heard of before, and maybe that will bring them in, or if they're looking for another genre altogether, then, they might not hit you anyways. If you want to market to a wider, let's say, sci-fi audience, for example, or drama or romance or whatever, then you might want to make it more general. But if you want somebody, to attract readers from a more precise genre, then you want to be more precise, With anything, over-specialization is a danger to anything, when you focus too much on one thing. But at the same time, I don't know, I think it could really work either way. And yeah, like you were saying, Oz, like when we make new genres that might not necessarily have a definitive place, that maybe are a bit wishy-washy on, what would you consider Atom Punk compared to, the old post-apocalyptic punk of the 80s or whatever, or sci-fi. I, for instance, don't know enough about that kind of genre to say whether it's needed or not, but I don't have a problem with there being something more specific, because maybe there is an audience for it right now, and maybe that's why it does exist. And if there's an audience, then market it to that audience. Who cares how big it is? Just do it.
Yeah. No, I agree with that one. I think I feel like genres are just kind of a way to get you started, but then subgenres are a way that you can really gain inspiration from. So it's important to understand the subgenre that you want to use, and then what tropes are associated with it, what you can maybe subvert, and how that can help mold your story. But it's important to understand that the moment that you call something a particular genre or subgenre, that immediately sets up expectations in terms of the sort of narrative tropes you're going to use, the sort of characters you might have there. It sets the audience up in such a way that, depending on, like, if you don't deliver on that, they're not going to like you, because they came in expecting something. So you have to be fairly clear or you have to understand what it is that you're doing, for one, and to ensure that when you classify something, that is either what you are delivering or what you are subverting. So, even if it's just going online and taking a cursory look, I mean, TV tropes is an absolute gold mine for what you can do with a genre and a subgenre, and where, what sort of expectations the audience is going to come to the table with. So just do some research.
Absolutely.
And find out what it is that audience wants and what it is that you can do to maybe do something different within that subgenre. I mean, a genre and a subgenre. Yeah, it should never be a genre and a subgenre should never shackle you down. It should
exactly. That's what I was just starting to get to. Yeah, don't let it define you wholly.
Yeah.
Go for other things. Don't be afraid of your audience either.
And
that maybe is the problem, the danger of putting too fine a point to something. That's the biggest danger that I can see of putting too fine a point on something is, that you do cage yourself a little bit too much.
Yeah.
Potentially.
I think also that perhaps what set Oz off, and I can understand that, is when people try to sort of speak from the higher ground and say, oh, but these are the laws of the thing, and this is what exists. And now you will need and they come across as someone very, let's say, stiff in
militant.
In the approach of all things. So of course, then you're going to be wanting to flip that person off and say,
both fingers, both hands
at
the same time.
Definitely.
As
that way.
I mean, as Barbosa from Pirates of the Caribbean says, they're more like guidelines. So, yeah. This is like my worst Jeffrey Rush impression ever. I'm sorry, dude. Sorry.
It's Australian too. Jeez.
Yeah, I know.
A new national hero until he gets.
There's a reason why I'm not on the screen. I am behind one. Because I'm a terrible actor.
And speaking of genres, you better start believing in ghost stories. Because you're in one.
Oh my god.
Oh, love it. See? He should be on the stage.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, well, there can be a lot of different things, and other people define your genres, and that can be a problem too, because you always think you're the one defining your genres or being part of it, but as you say, audience expectations change depending on who is the most vocal person about defining the genre that you're part of, or that you have decided to market your work under, or at least describe your work under. So perhaps you've got to be more vocal than they are and say, no, I'm the one who explains this. It can be some part of some big democratic kind of thing, or maybe you're all sort of joining in and being a joint describer of your particular genre in order to.
At the end of the day, it's your story. Like, at the end of the day, it's your creation. And there are guidelines to maybe help you have inspiration or give you an idea of where to start and how to classify and find an audience. But at the end of the day, you can do whatever the hell you want.
Yeah.
Like, there are no limits. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Free reign, people. Go nuts.
Yeah. But people, do have like an established place, so to speak. They've all not everyone is like beginning a story and having to define it. Maybe you already have an established, position within this kind of, your stuff has always been defined that way. It has always been successfully marketed that way. So that can, you've got a little bit of inertia in, momentum behind it. So, and you've got like a vested interest within a genre or whatever. So there can be that point of view. So not everyone's coming into it from a beginning. You've got like stuff that's already established within it. And how does that sort of change?
You've also got the benefit of mix and matching different subgenres as well to produce something really unique. So like do something, you could do just trying to think of one off the top of my head. It's not going very well. I have no idea at this time in the morning.
Than 3 genres at the moment. Like there's so many, but I can name 3 right now.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't want to give away any of my ideas because like my writing partner and I, we want to tackle throughout, if we're still friends after all of this. I might drive her nuts. I don't know. We want to write stories in every single genre. So we've got compost punk. Yeah. So like we want to do, so we've got like rom-com covered. We've got sci-fi fantasy covered. The next one we want to do is historical horror. We want to do something there. We want to, essentially we just want to tackle every genre we can. Maybe go back to an old one, do like a superhero romance.
Like you could even tackle them in a bunch of like short stories and stuff like that, like how neat would it be just to like get a hat and just like write down 20 plus genre titles and throw them in and pick like 3 at a time and pair them up together and see what you can Frankenstein together.
We could do like a Drunk Duck 24-hour genre challenge.
That'd be cool, actually.
Where you get assigned like 2 random genres and you have to marry them together and create a story.
Oh wow! That'd be totally fun.
A dead genre that used to be very popular was cowboy romance or western romance. That's not really done anymore these days. Maybe like that is like a very niche thing that's still done, but that used to be hugely popular. And that used to be the favorite literature of General Patton. Actually, he used to love that.
Really?
So yeah,
Aww. What a softie!
There's dead genres you can mine as well. That don't really exist as strongly anymore. The genre graveyard. Go digging.
We'll throw a few of those in the hat as real curly ones.
Yeah.
It's your job to resurrect this. Zombify this genre.
Zombify this genre. Reanimate.
Yeah, we could even have a Lovecraftian genre.
What was that, sir?
That's an idea. I mean, because he kind of did define his own. Anyway, never mind. We're about to end. So.
That's a whole subset of the whole horror. We didn't even go into the whole horror of it all.
Oh, that exists already. Yeah, the Lovecraftian horrors. Yeah, even when he was writing those back then, there were a lot of different writers all sharing the same universe. So that became before that was a genre. That was a genre.
Wasn't Conan and Cthulhu in the same universe, basically?
Yeah, they shared things. Yeah, Robert E. Howard borrowed that as did Clark Ashton Smith and all the other writers. Yeah, they all wrote together and they wrote letters to each other and said, "Yep, I want to like have some Cthulhu stuff in here. And I want to do this and I want to do that. And they did. They shared it all.
And there's been a revival of that, actually. And the recent most, in terms of like the pop culture zeitgeist, the biggest thing that I've seen anyway, I could be wrong, but like the biggest Lovecraftian themed thing to come out was Bloodborne by From Software. They did the video game, they did Dark Souls, Demon Souls, and another game no one remembers. And they did one called Bloodborne, and that was dripping with Lovecraftian horror. And I literally mean dripping. There was a lot of disgusting shit in there. Yeah, like things being birthed from like cosmic monstrosity sacks, and it was fantastic. Loved it. Because I love Lovecraftian horror. I like knowing my place in the universe, and that is, I do not matter. It's like a weight lifted off the shoulder. It's
insignificant.
I know, that's a good
cosmic
point.
is.
Yeah. It's like, no, what? There's like this cosmic being, and it doesn't care about you. And I'm like, oh, good, thank God. That's pressure. God. It doesn't care if I eat chips on the couch, like watching Netflix, and like get it down my bra. No one cares. The cosmic monstrosity doesn't care. Why should I?
It'll still drive you insane anyway.
Oh, so does politics.
We want a Cthulhu cosmic monster at this point. We're like, just stop our misery. We're all
come on, add to it. Let's make it interesting. Give us a reason to feel insane.
All right. Well, we should sort of finish up the Quackcast then on that note, that insanity. We're all sort of being drawn into the madness. The mouth of madness.
It's just that time of the morning.
And we were never heard from again. That's how all these Lovecraftian horrors end.
I'm waiting for the royal wedding to go that way today.
Oh, God. That's a Lovecraftian horror already. Okay. Thanks for being on the Quackcast, guys. The Genre Cast.
Oh, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.